know that anyone wanted to lead our seed round back when we were raising our seed round. Because again, we were building for an industry with very few exits at the time. We were outsiders to the industry, and construction tech was just unsexy at the time. It wasn't that people were knocking down our door saying, wow, you guys, like, please take our money.
Hello and welcome to First Money In, a show focused on now extraordinary founders and their very first time ever raising capital. My name is Nicole Wishoff, and I'm thrilled to bring you our latest episode. Today we welcome Maria Davidson, co-founder of Kojo, a startup that helps construction companies manage their construction material supply chains. Since launch in 2018, Kojo has raised over $80 million from very notable investors like Tiger Global, 8VC, and Battery Ventures. Join us as we learn more about where the idea for Kojo came from, how she approached each round of funding, and where she thinks the future of construction tech is headed. Earlier this year, I was in a pinch. I was hiring my first full-time hire and didn't have payroll set up. I posted a quick message on X asking for the best company to help me get up and running, and everyone quickly recommended Warp. Within a few hours, I was up and running with payroll and benefits and able to onboard my team. Warp is one of the few platforms that allows you to offer healthcare with a minimum of 2 employees. It has coverage across 50 states, manages all state tax compliance, offers health and 401k benefits, and with no strings attached. For a limited time, get a free AirPods 4 when you click the link below in the show notes to learn more about Warp. It's difficult to find the right banking partner. I was very fortunate to find Stifel Bank. Stifel's venture banking team is your trusted partner for a full range of banking solutions for both venture-backed companies and venture funds. Stifel Venture Banking supports seed through late-stage companies, providing solutions for treasury management, strategic lending, and tailored banking offerings. Check out stifelventurebanking.com to see how they can help you reach new heights. Stifel Venture Banking is a division of Stifel Bank, member FDIC. You can find the link below in show notes. I wanted to kick off with, so you were the chief of staff to Joe Lonsdale at AVC back, it looks like from 2016, 2018. And then you went from chief of staff to founding a construction tech company. Walk me through that transition.
It was a pretty big transition. When I started as Joe's chief of staff, my initial thought was I didn't even know that I wanted to start a company, right? I just knew that I wanted exposure. I grew up wanting to make as big an impact as I possibly could. And so my thinking was, I want to go out to Silicon Valley. I want to meet as many really smart people as I can. I want to see what people are up to, see what problems exist. There's this concept in Judaism that is called tikkun olam, which quite literally means fixing the world. And for me, a lot of it was around, well, where can I make the biggest impact, while I'm alive? Like, what are the biggest problems to fix? And so when I started working with Joe, a lot of what really appealed to me was that the 8VC mantra was, the world is broken, let's fix it.
Yep.
And so, as chief of staff, my initial position was, well, how do I learn about where the biggest problems are? And, construction ended up to be a really, really big area where there were lots of problems to solve.
At the time, what were the most common startups that were building in construction? Like right now, for example, I feel like all I see are fintech companies trying to do trade factoring for subcontractors.
That's funny. At the time, there was very, very little. In fact, back in 2018, building for construction was considered pretty crazy to most VCs that you spoke to.
Mm-hmm.
In part, that's because you hadn't had a lot of big exits, right? It was construction tech really started in 2011 when you had iPads come onto the scene. And for the first time ever, you had the ability to actually have connectivity on a job site.
Procore.
Yeah, and that was really the start of Procore, that was the start of PlanGrid. But back when we started, right around Jan 2018, you still hadn't had big exits that everyone could name. Procore hadn't IPO'd yet, PlanGrid hadn't sold yet. Everything, right, from the building connectors of the world, they were still really, really few success stories that you can point to. And then on the flip side, you had a bunch of people who had just spent the last 2 decades considering construction to be, an unsellable to industry. Because I remember people telling us, wait, are you guys going to have, 3-year-long sales cycles? Like, how can you build a venture-backable business? So yeah, and construction at the time, there was very little.
So you start noodling around. You raised a $4 million seed. Had you raised that coming out of AVC and saying, we're going to just take this capital and figure it out, like it was super early, or did you know exactly what you wanted to start with and then you raised the 4 million and got started?
Yeah, my philosophy was always to optimize for shots on goal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For us, we spent about 6 months just really studying the industry very, very closely. One thing that we did realize is back then, every company that we saw was building either for the general contractors or for the owner developers. Very, very few were building specifically for the subcontractors. And so we built up this thesis of, wait, the subcontractors are the people that actually do the work, you know? They're the ones that are actually there. They're installing material. And for them, we realized, 60% of the cost is in labor, but 40% of the cost is in materials. And
Yes.
across the US, right, that's billions of dollars a year. And so what we started thinking about was, well, if we're going to build for the trade contractors, we're going to have to build a really big product surface area, right? Because really, we knew that we needed to solve procurement pain points, but also we needed to solve inventory management pain points, tool tracking pain points, prefab pain points. I mean, you look at construction across the US and the number of problems that still remains unsolved is very, very big. And so, someone called it an avocado seed back when we did it. Because they said, well, that's a pretty big seed round. Don't you guys just want to take, $1 or $2 million?
Oh, I see.
Maybe
Yeah,
$1
yeah.
or $2?
That was going to be another question for you, which is in 2018. I mean, a $4 million seed round is pretty big, right? Like, I think obviously not including the current AI madness, but like, was that really large at the time?
It was pretty large at the time. And again, the framework for us was, well, hey, we're going to have to build a really big product surface area here. And so how do we maximize for really shots on goal and give ourselves the time to build it? I also think coming from VC, something I'd seen is most companies tend to pivot their initial ideas. And, in some cases, those are really wide pivots. In some cases, it's smaller pivots and refinements. But knowing that that was the case, we sort of said to ourselves, well, let's raise a round that gives us enough breathing room that we can give ourselves the flexibility to go through those pivots. And again, to go into this industry that at the time was really uncharted waters and have the ability to actually build something that, was a really powerful product instead of having to constrain ourselves from the very get-go.
Right. So did AVC, were they the ones that led that round, the $4 million round?
They didn't. Our first round it was a safe. So,
Oh,
honestly,
okay.
I don't know that.
I was poking around and I was like, I have plenty of data on who did her ABC, but I have no idea who did the seed round.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone wanted to lead our seed round back when we were raising our seed round. Because
Yep.
again, we were building for an industry with very few exits at the time. We were outsiders to the industry, and construction tech was just unsexy at the time. We ended up,
Interesting.
we raised the safe, and we ended up, finding a group of folks, all of whom said, we want to bet on you as a team. We like the idea, we like the initial proof points, but we're not in a position where we're saying, hey, we're going to lead this entire round. We just want to put in
That
money on
is
the safe.
interesting. Yeah, so I had assumed Joe just did it, and I was like, Gosh, that is a gift because raising one, not only 4 million that early. So I even love the audacity of raising four on safes even more because you had to stitch together. Because the other piece of this, as you were essentially alluding to, is that VCs even still, I don't think really understand the construction industry. It's very people see the TAM, even founders. They see, wow, $1.3 trillion market in the US, 13 plus trillion globally. Let me build something. And they usually go after like the money itself. But VCs, it doesn't mean they understand it and are pretty shy to invest in it. And I'm sure that was the case in 2018. So do you even remember what your biggest check was of the 4 million? Like, was it 500K? Did you get a million from anyone?
We did. Our biggest check was a million
Okay.
of the four. But yeah, I mean, we really had to go out there and hustle. I mean, we raised a lot of 50K checks, 100K checks, right? It wasn't that people were knocking down our door saying, wow, you guys, like, please take our money. It was the
Yep.
opposite of that. We went and specifically, we actually found people that we also thought could be really helpful to us when building the business. So we found people that had connections to real estate, connections to construction, connections to generally, vertical SaaS. And yeah, I mean, we really had to hustle. It was a round that it was a very hard round to raise back then.
How long did it take, and did everyone come in on the same? Did you just set a post-money like price for the valuation, or was it kind of all over the place?
No, it was kind of all over the place. I mean, well, for us, I think no one wants to commit fast, right? No
That
one
hasn't
wants.
changed.
Yeah, well, correct. Back then, at least with us, right? No one wanted to be the fast money in, and so I think a lot of it was about us rounding out enough capital and rounding up enough well-established people that had a lot of credibility and that gave us credibility. And then what we found is once we had, I think it was once we had about 2.5 million committed, then all of a sudden the remaining 1.5 came in much more quickly because, a lot of the time I think with VC, people want that legitimization of, oh, well, if those people are in, then I'm in as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So you then, I never know if the PR comes out 2 months after you raise money or like 8 years because people just don't, some optimize for it and some do not care. So you ended up raising obviously a Series A led by
Mhm.
AVC. You had some other great folks in. Had you figured out, I'm assuming by that point, exactly what you were going to build? Did you have customers and revenue? Like, was there a
Yeah.
tipping point in between?
Yeah, the tipping point came pretty quickly. So for us, right, we raised our seed round in October 2018, and then for about a year and a half, we just got heads down and built. And for us, a really big piece of it is we knew that we needed to be an integration first company, right? We needed to build really best in class integrations, and we needed to build a lot of them because we knew that if we didn't integrate with the accounting systems that our customers used, right, you could build the world's best product, but it wouldn't click. And then what we found is we brought the product to market in March 2020. We obviously didn't know that March 2020 was going to end up what March 2020 ended up being.
Yes.
And in those first few months of bringing the product to market, we very quickly went from sort of 0 to about 40 customers. And that was, for us, a real sign of, wait, there's product market fit here, right? We saw that we could sell with a pretty standardized message. And on the flip side of it, we also saw that COVID was coming. And especially, I mean, do you remember April and May of that year? Like, it was pretty scary.
Oh, yes. So when I was in New York for work visiting MasterCard, I think it was like March 2020, and we were also launching a neobank. So like, and we were in the Wall Street Journal, we had an exclusive, and it was like March 13th, and like the city shut down March 12th. It was really scary, like for like the
Yeah.
next 2 months.
It
Yeah.
was. I mean, and I think, as a CEO of a company, your job is to make sure that the company succeeds and crucially that the company never runs out of money. And so
Yes.
I was looking at this and I was like, oh my God, we've just spent 2 years building out all of these integrations, building out this product. We had just brought it to market and started seeing that there was real adoption. And at the same time, we're looking at what could have been the real apocalypse. We had so many people telling us just hunker down, the next 2 years are going to be dead, like just be heads down and keep costs to a minimum.
In construction, are they even letting people physically show up to jobs to install the materials and like get, like are people actually able to work was a big
I mean, it
question.
was completely all over the place. Pretty quickly, a lot of the projects that our customers do, they were designated as being, essential to the economy. But
Mhm.
at the same time, for a lot of people, and this was a huge, huge moment of kind of an eye-opening moment for us, is we realized, wait, if your purchasing agent or if your accounting manager couldn't come into the office, you as a construction company, you didn't have access to their email. You didn't know what was meant to be arriving on the job site that day. You didn't know what had already been purchased versus what hadn't. You, in many cases, didn't even know what invoices were outstanding versus what weren't, because you
Mhm.
rely on everyone being in person and a lot of the information being, in that person's head or in that person's inbox or, in that person's text messages. And so for us, back then, it was around April or May that, we were sitting there and we said, well, we have traction. Let's go raise a Series A now because we need to make sure that we guarantee the survival of this company. And whatever comes over the next 10 years, sorry, over the next 2 years,
Yeah.
let's make sure that we have the capital on the balance sheet because we're seeing real traction.
So you actually, for the A, it wasn't preempted. You were like, we're in a great place now. We're picking our heads up. We're going to go run a process. And then
Yeah.
obviously AVC, you have a relationship there, but they underwrote the business. They ended up leading. Did you find that like a lot of folks, I guess maybe you went back to some of the similar folks, were they like more excited now that there were data points? Were you still getting a lot of, we don't understand it. We're not interested in the space?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I guess one of my underlying principles was, hey, a lot of VCs don't know the space well. And so I was thinking to myself, if I want to make sure that I have really good partners, let me build these long-term relationships and make sure that we're really educating people about the problems that we're solving and the problems that our customers experience. We, from the very beginning, had been building a lot of these relationships. So by the time that we were raising the A, we had already had about 2 years worth of talking to investors and, talking about the problems that exist for trade contractors and, generally for everything that touches materials in the supply chain. When we went out to raise, what we found was the number of proof points that we had at that point, it was dramatically different to when we were raising our seed, right? Because there we could, get you on reference calls with 10 customers, and those 10 customers could validate that even in a really early version of Kojo, there was a lot of value that was really being added to them.
Yes, yeah, super interesting. And then you very quickly, so yeah, raise a Series A 2020, and then in 2021, obviously peak of the market, people are no
Yeah.
longer worried, right? Like tons of IPOs in 21. Tiger was doing a lot of deals, and they did your Series B. So was that preempted? Like, were you also like, hey, listen, we've had a crazy 12 months, we're going to go back to market and raise a B because we've got some momentum?
Oh, from then on, every round we had done became preempted. After our Series A, we grew like crazy, right? We went, from 0 to 2 million in ARR in sort of in record time for construction tech.
Wow.
And at that stage, we started seeing a lot of inbound, right? And in part also the market was really, really active.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for our Series A, we got a couple of competing term sheets. For our Series B, we got a lot more. And so for our Series B, what we found is by then, not only had we shown that we could scale, right? And by then we had grown to, I think we had probably 100 or two, no, we probably had close to 200 customers at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
But what we had also shown was that there were a lot of expansion vectors, right? And for us, when we started, we were only focused on electrical, because we said, hey, construction's a really big industry. There are so many trades out there. We need to be really, really focused when we began. And by the time that we got to Series B, we started getting a lot of inbound from companies in mechanical, right? Companies that did maybe HVAC or plumbing that were saying, hey, we heard about you guys from someone on the electrical side. We have a lot of the same pain points. And so I think that then allowed us to say, okay, it makes sense to raise a Series B because we know what we're going to do with our Series B capital.
Yeah, going off script a bit here, because construction is really hard to penetrate and it's a super offline relationship based industry. And I think specifically around procurement, tons of rebates that happen kind of like off and then again, like it's just tough to penetrate. So what do you think you got right? And maybe what do you think a lot of startups get wrong? Because a lot of people try to build software for these trades and they do not succeed.
Well, so it's a very good question. I think for us, one, it was just starting with a lot of focus, right? It was building the best possible product specifically for the electrical industry. That was the first thing that we got right because it allowed us to really, really nail down, a lot of the delight that customers feel, it comes down to edge cases, right? It comes down to simplifying the really small things that otherwise are frustrating and they're time consuming and they're the least favorite parts of people's jobs, but it was really, really, truly adding value to the customer. And I think if you try, and I see a lot of companies, try to go out big and they try to work with everyone, it makes it really difficult because ultimately the trades do have real differences and nuances, and you've got to be really thoughtful about what are the nuances of that trade. And then I think the second thing is also we really invested in customer success. Much more so, we had some investors in the early days being like, why are you putting so many resources into customer success? Surely the product should be easy and you can just onboard it yourself. Our thought was, no, in an industry that hasn't adopted that much tech, that doesn't work, right? Not only do you need to invest a lot in customer success, but you need to go on site. You need to build those real relationships. Even during COVID, we were trying to figure out how can we gamify our onboardings? How can we be on site as much as possible wherever it was possible? And I think that meant that we got real champions amongst our early customers, right? They were willing to be evangelists. They were willing to really go and advocate for us. And also they gave us a lot of feedback because they saw that we were actually implementing it.
And to find them, even getting started, was it going to the trade shows and trying to be in person? Like, I'm assuming you weren't getting clients from DMing them on LinkedIn.
When we first got started, we sent everyone emails. We asked them, hey, would you be willing to spend 20 minutes with us? We have this idea. We'd love to see if it could be of interest to you. No one replied. Pretty quickly, we started realizing, wow, this industry, they're just not going to reply to an email from someone that they don't know.
Exactly right.
And so we started going to job sites in San Francisco, literally with boxes of donuts and pizza boxes, and bringing them to job sites and handing them over the fences and using that to get people to talk to us. And that just became so ingrained in our DNA. We're deeply scrappy. And even when, we started selling, we had maybe 40 customers, then we had 100 customers, we had 200 customers, that scrappiness never left. So, we went to every event we could. We would go to clay shoots. We would go, literally on golf trips. We would host as many events as we possibly could. We got really, really deep on, well, what are the trade associations that our customers are members of? What kind of events do they actually enjoy? Right? We started sending beef jerky around the country in exchange for taking demos with us because we found, people replied to us and said, oh, how
Yeah.
delightful it is to receive some
It's
beef
so,
jerky in the morning.
yeah, I know, and I love that you're validating this. I've invested in, and of course, I worked at Built for a couple of years with Chase, who's amazing. But I've invested in a few construction tech businesses that are selling largely fintech services into the trades and usually
Mhm.
SMB. And I'm like, you better buy or have a cheap pair of boots that you don't mind getting dirty because you're going to be in person on job sites, and that is going to be how you acquire customers for the first probably 2 years minimum. And then you're going to tell your team to do the same when you hire a sales team, that they're going to wear a lot of clothes they don't like that much because they're going to be on job sites. Like that's
I
just what
mean,
it
even
takes.
even to this day, Nicole, I mean, I now have an app that tracks how many flights I take in any given year. I've been on 72 flights this year, and the vast, vast majority of them are all work related,
Wow.
right? So even now, we have customers where, they'll say, we need to meet you in person, right? We want to enter into a multi-year long relationship with you. We need you to come here on site. We want to show you our operation. We want to show you how we work. And we want you to feel the energy of the team. We want you to meet people in person. And so, yeah, it's an industry where you've got to go out there. And I think that scrappiness, I mean, I'm so grateful that we've had it in the culture because now everyone that's grown with Kojo has that inherent scrappiness to them.
No, I love that. So going back, so Tiger, you were obviously, you said you preempted, I think it sounds like the Series B and the C market was a little bit different. I've seen data on this, and sometimes founders say, "Hey, I was preempted. Should I run a process on the back of that just to make sure we're choosing, the right partner?" And then in most cases, I think that the companies end up going with the preempted term sheet. Was that the case? Like, was Tiger first, if you're willing to share in that round?
No, no, they weren't. There were a couple. There were a couple of other funds that had come to us and said, "Hey, we've heard," because again, we'd been maintaining these relationships for a long
Mhm,
time, and
mhm.
so for us, I wanted to make sure that all the funds that I was really excited about working with were tracking us, right? And so, we would have these regular catch-ups. We tried to be very transparent about, we'll share our metrics, we'll share our decks, because again, for us, we want people to know how we're doing, and if they're excited about what we're doing, we want them to be in a place where if someone does preempt us, right, they can respond quickly. But no, we had a couple of other funds come to us, and Tiger actually stepped in pretty late into the process. But I mean, the entire process for our Series B was about 10 days.
Wow. Yeah, I was gonna say you probably didn't have to spend too much time on it also. That's crazy. And then so a year later, it seems like, again, I don't know when the PR comes out when you actually raised, you ended up raising a Series C. So I'm assuming, and that was preempted
Yeah,
from back.
that was actually exactly a year afterwards.
It was, and that one was also preempted, so you weren't fundraising at the time.
Yeah, and that one was, we had first met Battery, who are amazing to work with. We had first met them before we were raising our Series A. So we had known them for more than 2 years. And we had been regularly catching up with them. Our board member from Battery, he had led the Series B back in Service Titan way back in the day. And so he had a very strong thesis about the trades and, what was needed to be built for the trades. And so for us, we had known them for a long time. And so by the time that they came to us, that relationship had already been pretty deep.
Okay, that's awesome. So you were able to obviously raise more capital. You've got great investors. Any tips for founders? I think you gave, like, I mean, you really had to brute force getting the initial round of money in. And I'm assuming that was kind of challenging, like do we even want to do this? Like, is it worth it? Like, no one believes in us kind of thing. But any maybe initial feedback for founders, both just getting the initial fundraising out of the door and then maybe even later stage, like just lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, earliest stage, I think it's so important to just optimize for shots on goal, right? I meet a lot of founders now who they want the best possible lead for their seed round. But sometimes you've just got to get scrappy, right? You don't even need a lead necessarily. You can raise a safe. You can raise a safe and start by bringing in a few people that can really just get you going and use that to build up proof points. And with those proof points, then yeah, you can go out and you can get that dream lead for your Series A, or even, you can actually raise an official seed round and do a priced round after that original safe. But I think the most important thing is just get going, right? Because those proof points are ultimately what investors are looking for.
Mhm.
And, once you have a lot of proof points, it almost looks like success overnight. All of a sudden it's like, whoa,
Yes.
everyone wants to invest in this company, right? But that's because they've gotten those proof points. And then I think the other thing is also just being really realistic about what the industry needs. For example, for us, we knew that we needed to spend at least 2 years just building the product before we could bring it to market, because our industry has a lot of edge cases. Even if you look just at electrical construction, no two contractors operate in exactly the same way, because this is an industry, and I think a lot of these, what you'd call kind of older school industries, a lot of them have evolved for hundreds of years without tech. And by the time the tech is coming to them, right, you can't come to them and say, hey, abandon all your previous processes and do things the way that our software is designed. Because they're just going to say, like, no, thank you. I have my own processes, right? I have a team that's been built around doing things a certain way. And so you've really got to come and meet the customer where they're at. And that's something that I see, I think a lot of companies, especially that came out of PLG, they'll come in and they'll say, oh, it's so simple. Everyone's just going to download the product and use it the way that it's intended to. Sometimes I speak to our customers and I'll be amazed at the ways that, they've hacked our product to customize it to their workflow. That's just how the industry works.
Have you seen since 2018, when there were probably very few VCs even saying they looked at construction and probably more generalist, a big wave of maybe more construction focused funds entirely that are specialized, or even funds that now are generalist funds, but they do construction? Like, has that evolved?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think since 2018, you've had, you had the Procore IPO, you've had a number of large exits, all in, the ranges of kind of hundreds of millions of dollars. You've had companies that have, scaled to double digits of ARR pretty quickly. And so now I think you look, and again, the number of companies that have done that is still very small. And in construction tech, it's definitely much smaller than in a lot of other parts of the overall tech ecosystem. But I think now I see investors get really excited about the space, because I think what they've seen is, right, they've seen proof points that the sales cycle can be efficient and that it can be repeatable. And similarly, we've seen a lot of, let's say, large real estate companies or large general contractors that want to get into investing, and they've set up venture funds. And, we've had amazing experiences working with some of those groups, because they're directly connected to our customers and they can make a lot of introductions, and they can give a lot of really good product feedback. And we've seen a lot of companies that are now starting to want to get a lot deeper into investment, on the distributor side and even on the manufacturer side. It always seems impossible until it's done. And then once you have those proof points, now we see everyone's really excited about construction tech.
Yes, no, exactly. Last question for you, and you can think on this for a minute if you need to. Any maybe either hot takes or just takes generally on where you think the biggest opportunities are in construction tech going forward? Either something that already exists that you think is going to have crazy tailwinds, or maybe something that no one's building that they should be.
There's just still so many, right? There are so many problems that aren't solved. I think when it comes to the trades, there's still huge opportunities to simplify how payments work, how the overall flow of funds work, how the relationship between the GCs and subs works, right? How to do reporting much more seamlessly, how to get everyone onto the same page. I think there's huge opportunities just for AI to automate increasingly more of what today is still a little bit too manual. I think there's also enormous opportunity when it comes to things like AI to come in around steps tied to generative design and the takeoff process and the estimating process, right? Because a lot of that is still really, really manual. And then I think kind of on the flip side of the coin, and this is, where we're really focused, is there's a lot of opportunities to improve the relationship between how the trades interact with vendors and how the manufacturers also plug into everything, right? Because it's still really, really hard for someone on a job site to confidently say, where is my stuff and when is it getting here? And that's, the problem that for us, we're super excited about solving.
Yeah, I love it. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. This was fantastic and I learned a ton.
Of course, this was a ton of fun. Thank you.